Today, our special guest, Mitchell Shaw, joins us to examine how the far left and their fake news so-called legacy mainstream media outlets are trying to neutralize constitutional conservatives and patriots by comparing them and associating them with the Q or QAnon movement. This is Anarchy in America with Christian Gomez. In last week's episode, our special guest, Jimmy from Brooklyn, mentioned Anatoly Golitsyn's New Lies for Old and the trust operation organized by the then OGPU or KGB to convince anti-communists and the West that a collapse of communism was imminent in the 1920s. On pages 13 and 14 of New Lies for All, Golitsyn explains how the OGPU, Soviet Security Service, created the trust operation to lure Russian anti-communists into joining a fake anti-Soviet organization called the Monarchist Alliance of Central Russia. This PSYOP operation convinced its followers that the Monarchist Alliance of Central Russia had penetrated the highest levels of the Soviet army, even the government, and that the fall of both Vladimir Lenin and his Bolshevik government was imminent. Trust the plan, they said, but rather than a fall of communism and arrest of Lenin, it was the anti-communists who were rounded up, arrested, and ultimately killed. Does this sound familiar? Joining us today to expose QAnon and its insistence that people trust the plan that will ultimately lead to the supposed arrest of Hillary Clinton, the Bidens, and the imminent collapse of the deep state is Mitchell Shaw, contributor to the New American Magazine. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Christian. Always a pleasure to be here.
Would you say that the Q movement is a disinformation strategy, or is it really military intelligence at the highest levels that's fighting to restore the republic?
I think, okay, if I'm only given those two options, then no, it is not the latter. It is the former. It would have to be a disinformation campaign. There is a third option that this is just a bunch of 19-year-olds in their mom's basement having an awful lot of fun at America's expense. Now, I would entertain either of those notions, that it is a bunch of 19-year-olds in their pajamas eating cold pizza and entertaining themselves by confusing the ever-loving heck out of America. Or I would entertain the notion, which I lean more toward, that it is a deliberate disinformation campaign. The one thing that is certain is that these are not people within the highest ranks of military intelligence who are telling people what's going on. And the reason that I say that is because they've been right exactly 0 times, Christian. All the way back, post number 1. If you go to so before I get into that, let me say that there's a difference between Q proper, meaning that you actually go to the Q forum and read what Q, whoever he or they are, read whatever Q is posting, and Q's followers who take this stuff and run with it with, if it were possible, even wilder ideas than what Q is actually posting. But if you go back to post number 1, the very first post, and I covered this in an issue of the New American Magazine, a print article that I did, I think it was back in July. But in that, I write about post number 1, that was that Hillary Clinton would soon be arrested, that her passport had already been tagged to keep her from fleeing the country, and that she would be judged before a military tribunal. Well, it's been a couple of years, and maybe I just missed that news cycle, Christian, but I don't think it ever happened. And very recently, I saw a post. Now, I don't know if this was Q proper because I didn't take the time to track it down. It was a tweet that ran across my timeline, and it's, of course, since been deleted as disinformation. But that Joe Biden has been arrested and will be judged before a military tribunal, where he may face execution before this military tribunal because Trump is still in charge. Now, somebody needed to inform Joe Biden that he has been arrested, because he does not seem to be aware of that, and neither does anyone else, because it's not so.
Yeah, the same thing happened in January. There were viral posts going out on the Parler, well, I guess maybe not Parler, but Gab, and on Facebook saying that the Pope was arrested, and this was on Sunday morning, and all you had to
Yep,
do was go to the Vatican's YouTube channel that day and watch the live stream of him giving his Sunday morning sermon. So
that's right.
clearly he wasn't yet informed about his arrest as well when that
Well,
was
maybe it
going
was.
on.
To be fair, maybe it was house arrest. Okay, so clearly it's disinformation. Now, some of what you just read, I was completely unaware of, but it's not unlike the fictional case that's laid down in the book 1984, where it turns out that all these people that think they're part of the resistance, there is no resistance. The resistance is a false flag operation of Big Brother to draw together people who would form a resistance if there were not already one. So this gives them a place to go to, something to plug into. And it appears to me that Q really fits that, because Q's message from the beginning has been unwaveringly, there's nothing you need to do. Don't do anything. In fact, one of their posts said, get the popcorn ready, the show's about to begin. So all you are is an observer. Your job as a Q follower or a Q subscriber to that ideology is just to watch and enjoy. Don't do anything. In specific posts, they said this repeatedly. Don't do anything because you're going to get in the way of the master plan. So they're not calling on people to be active. They're not calling on people to do something to save the country. They're feeding people misinformation about things that are not happening because, as I said, aside from the fact that the writings come off like Nostradamus, I mean, some of the stuff is so esoteric in the way that it's written, you have no idea what's being said. When the eye of the pig is in the third of the moon, and yet it's what are you, it's craziness, it's insanity. But besides that, they've been right exactly 0 times. Everything they have predicted has gone 180 degrees the wrong direction. They said that Trump would not lose the election. Trump lost the election. Well, we can debate that as to whether Trump actually lost the election or had it stolen. But then they said that Trump would not leave the White House. Trump left the White House. They said that Trump would not be impeached. He was impeached twice. So nothing that they've predicted has happened anything like they said it would happen. It is clearly disinformation designed to confuse and frustrate patriots and keep them from being active in something like the John Birch Society that does offer real resistance to the insider's plan.
Absolutely. And I believe it was back on March 19, 2019, that was one of the dates that was predicted by the QAnon or the Q followers, that there would be massive arrests of members of government related to a sex trafficking conspiracy that involves the Democratic caucus in Congress, that they were behind child trafficking and cannibalism, all this radical nonsense that cannot be independently verified. And the date comes, and of course, nothing happens, like every other Q post and Q drop. You mentioned the first Q drop, of course, and I have it right here. It read, HRC, or Hillary Rodham Clinton, extradition already in motion effectively yesterday, with several countries in case of cross-border run. Passport approved to flagged effective 10/30 or October 30th at 12:01 a.m. Expect massive riots organized in defiance and others fleeing the U.S. to occur. Of course, none of this happened. Hillary Clinton she hasn't been informed about her arrest. And as far as I know, Nancy Pelosi is still the Speaker of the House, unfortunately. So when you look at the QAnon and the fruits of this movement, and compare that to, say, the John Birch Society and others that have been warning for decades now, Dan Smoot, you can go back and look at people who were giving you a straightforward response or answer, or telling you what was really going on in a straight manner, not in this, as you put it, an esoteric, ambiguous manner. Should conservatives be weary of future Q-type stuff coming along?
Yes, I think once bitten, twice shy, right? Like you fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. If people who have fallen for this and have had their eyes opened to the fact that nothing that had been predicted or prophesied or reported has come to pass the way they said it would, then those people ought to be really, really cautious to look for an organization that can footnote, document, verify everything they claim. And of course, the premier organization that has always done that since 1958 is the John Birch Society. But I want to say one other thing, and I don't know if it was about the particular date you were talking about, where they were talking about mass arrests and all of this stuff that were supposed to take place that day. But if we're talking about the same date, because there were a couple of those that Q predicted, but on one of those, none of that happened. But what did happen was that 3 people in the Trump campaign got arrested. Now, of course, it was all nonsense. It was about Russian collusion and all of that stuff. But nonetheless,
speaking of disinformation,
if we're going to have that conversation, let's go ahead and have that conversation. But rather than Hillary Rodham Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, and all these others being arrested, it was Trump people who were arrested. And then, of course, Q just moves on like that never happened and just continues to report this nonsense that on its face stinks of a lie. And then later, facts prove that it was a lie. But somehow people continue to believe it, because it's not unlike the history of mankind, with false prophets being listened to while true prophets were stoned to death. We want to hear what we want to hear. And what we want to hear is that we're winning, and I don't have to do anything to make that happen. The reality is that Americans need to stop looking for a hero to save America and be the heroes that save America by getting involved in helping the John Birch Society to create an informed electorate that will push us forward through these 4 years of darkness that we're about to face, or maybe just 2 years if we could flip the house and make a difference. But that's what it's going to take, an informed electorate. It's hard work, but it is the shortcut. There's not a shorter shortcut.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct. I've heard this before. I don't know who said this, but I've heard it before. It said that deception is not getting the enemy to believe what you want them to believe, but to get your opponent to believe what they want to believe. And people are more susceptible to believe what they want to hear. And like you pointed out, the QAnon posts and drops, as they're called, they constantly reinforce what people want to believe. Oh, this is going to happen. This massive exposure of the deep state is going to occur. Trump is going to stay president. It's going to usher in this grand new era of transparency. And we're going to root out the deep state and all the corruption in government. And it doesn't happen. And as you accurately pointed out, we should be waiting for someone to rescue us. We need to rescue ourselves and do the work that needs to be done. And therein lies the difference between JBS and a few other good organizations that are out there too, and the QAnon. QAnon has you sitting at home doing nothing, waiting for events to occur that won't, or the JBS organization encourages people to make a difference and take a stand. Are there any final words that you want to mention? Any last remarks you have?
Well, yeah, just that if you're out there and you're watching this, and we've made you angry because we're disputing QAnon as being a legitimate source, I would just encourage you to go back through, start at drop 1, and just read until you convince yourself that none of this has happened. None of what Q has predicted has happened. Maybe you'll have to make it through the first couple of pages. Maybe you'll have to read further than that. Some of you won't have to read that far to realize that you've been taken for a ride. Then, when you're tired of that, pop over to jbs.org and take a look at the timeline, the historical timeline that we've got on that website of the accomplishments of the John Birch Society since 1958, and ask yourself, where's your time better spent? Regurgitating Q's lies, or getting involved with the John Birch Society to help create an informed electorate and actually save America?
Thank you so much. Amen. Take care and God bless you.
Thank you, Christian.
You can find Mitchell Shaw's article entitled Questioning QAnon, in which he goes through and debunks their various Q drops on thenewamerican.com. And for more about the similar trust operation orchestrated by the Soviets in the 1920s, read Anatoly Golitsyn's New Lies for Old, which you can purchase at shopjbs.org. If you wish to know what's really going on in a straightforward manner and actually do something about it, consider membership in the John Birch Society. Until next week, stay educated, stay free, and God bless.